Hey guys, welcome to another episode of BodyGeeks. Today we're going to go over my predictions for the 2019 Mr. Olympia competition. Let's get started.
So first, I'm going to go over some of the guys who aren't in this year's Olympia that make it kind of interesting. Obviously, the first one is Shawn Rhoden. Shawn is not allowed to compete by the people who promote the Olympia because he's facing criminal charges. And as a current Mr. Olympia, that's a huge hit to the show because we always want the reigning Mr. Olympia to come back, and so you could root for them to win again or root for somebody to dethrone them, to knock out the champ. You know, and each Olympia win is kind of like their own era, so to speak. You could look back at all the Olympias in history, and you can kind of talk about each win and why it was special and how long that person held the title. And, they're a legend. They're now part of the sport forever. So Shawn was banned by the Olympia, but not by the IFBB. I think that we're going to see Shawn compete after the Olympia. Another big name that's not going to be in the show this year is Heath. Now, Phil has posted that his wife is not doing too well as far as having some health issues. And I can tell you straight up, if my wife wasn't doing too well, the last thing I would be thinking about is bodybuilding. So that's the biggest reason why I don't think that Phil is doing the show this year. Now, there's a chance he might surprise us and show up and stomp everybody and get his record-tying 8th Olympia win. But if he is planning that, he's doing it kind of in the shadows because, you know, he's making sure that, like he's saying, this picture was from a while ago. And, you know, he's not trying to mislead anybody by posting an older picture and having people think that, he's shredded right now. So, Phil has been, traveling. He's dealing with his wife's health issues, and he's not purposefully trying to mislead people of a will he, won't he. So I don't think that Phil's going to compete this year. I do think we'll see Phil back on the Olympia stage, though, at some point. Big Ramy didn't qualify this year, which is another huge one because Big Ramy has been a threat to win the Olympia title for a while now. And a lot of people are saying, well, if Shawn and Phil are out, this would have been his year. Now, Ramy just straight up didn't qualify. So it's on him, really, what it comes down to. He's done some guest posting recently, and he's posting some pictures showing him looking as if he could step on the Olympia stage. He's not going to be allowed to unless they extend some sort of special invite, but I don't think they will. So I think that we're going to see Big Ramy on one of the stages after the Olympia. Now, Kai Green, a lot of people, myself included, have wanted to see Kai compete in the Olympia. I mean, personally, out of all the guys I'm mentioning here, I'm still probably the most bummed that Kai isn't competing because I would love to see his story include a Mr. Olympia title. I think that Kai is really passionate about bodybuilding. I think he's extremely weird at times and speaks in riddles, but hey, that's his persona. At least he's him. I would really love to see him compete, but based on what I've seen on his Instagram, as great a shape as he's in, I'm not seeing I'm getting ready for the Olympia shape. Kai just kind of walks around like this all the time, looking as if he could just hop and prep for a show and do it. So, again, I would love to see Kai compete in the Olympia. I don't think we're going to see him in the Olympia. I do think that we may see him back on a bodybuilding stage someday. Maybe an Arnold or something like that. Maybe the Rock show that's supposed to be coming out next year. But I don't think that we're going to see Kai on the Olympia.
So as you guys can see, it's not very often that we have an open Olympia like this. I mean, this is only the 10th time in 54 years since the contest started that we've had an Olympia where we don't have a returning champ. So unless, like I said, Shawn Rhoden gets the okay to compete at the last minute, we're going to have an Olympia that's basically open. Nobody has to knock out the champ. Now, Dexter is competing, and he's a former Mr. Olympia, but other than that, the rest of these guys are hungry and hunting for that title. And the cool thing about Dexter is he's still going to be in that hunt too. So unless Dexter wins, no matter what, we're going to have our 15th Mr. Olympia since the sport began back in 1965. So that makes this year exciting.
All right, so let's get into the front runners for this year's show. Brandon Currie is my favorite. He's my pick to win it based on what I'm seeing so far. Brandon has got crazy aesthetics. He now has plenty of mass. He's shown that he's in great condition. One of his biggest weaknesses was his back, which is now one of his strengths. Another one of his weaknesses have always been his legs. He still doesn't have, in my opinion, dominant legs. Like, if he loses, I'm going to say that it's because his legs didn't have the deep separation as other Olympia winners have had. That said, Brandon's upper body with his small waist, crazy muscle bellies, he's built to be a Mr. Olympia. So he won the Arnold earlier this year, and he knocked out a William Bonek to do it. And William was another, kind of Olympia favorite. He's in my top 3 as well. So right now, I think that Brandon Currie, if you look at his pictures, you look at his Instagram, he's on track to be the main threat for the Olympia title this year. Now, the guy who's most challenging to him is Roelly Winklaar. Now, Roelly, he doesn't post much on his personal page. It's always on like Bader's or his trainers, or you find his videos and pictures somewhere else sometimes, But Roelly, I think that if he nails it, which he hasn't yet, he's been great a lot of times, but he hasn't really nailed his best. I think he could beat Brandon. I think that he would outmass Brandon, and as long as he doesn't have a stomach distension problem, which, as you'll see in one of the videos I'm going to pull up, he's kind of showing that he doesn't. He's had issues before flexing his legs, which, this video shows that he's working on that. He's got pretty good separation there, and he's got crazy hamstrings, which you'll see here in a second too. So one of Brandon's weaknesses that I said has kind of been his legs, not so much in size, but in getting that kind of separation and detail. Roelly clearly has all the size in the world when you look at any body part of his, and crazy conditioning. Like a hamstring shot like that, I personally haven't really seen Brandon have like a wow shot from just his legs. He's more of a complete package kind of guy, right? So that said, Roelly kind of historically has been very hit or miss. He hasn't shown up in crisp condition consistently ever. Like last year he was 3rd at the Olympia. He looked phenomenal. Some people were saying that he could have even beaten Phil, which I don't really agree with, but he did look great. That said, Roelly at the Arnold didn't show up, and he got his ass kicked. So we'll see what Roelly shows up, but if a good Roelly shows up, he could win. Now, as far as consistency is concerned, William Bonek has been pretty damn consistent. He always shows up in really good shape. He's probably the most complete guy on the stage. He's not missing any body part. He's got pretty good aesthetics, especially for having kind of like a short midsection. So Bonek, if he's on and if the other guys are off, could win this. Bonek is smaller than both those guys, so if they're on, I think that just he wasn't born with the big enough skeletal structure to take on a big and in shape Roelly and Brandon Currie. But that said, if either one of those guys are off at all, I think Bonek is going to capitalize on that. Now, he's not with his coach, Neil Hill, anymore, and some people are saying that could be an issue for him. Personally, it could be, but I don't think it's going to be. I think Bonek's been around the block enough that he's going to be able to get himself in shape and make sure he's okay. Khadisha Pond is definitely an interesting guy and definitely some really good news for this year's Olympia. He's had issues getting into America because of some political reason between us and Iran. He's here now, which means he can compete in the Olympia, which is going to give the fans something they've been wanting for a very long time. The question now is going to be, is he doing open or is he doing 212? A lot of people thought that he was Flex Lewis's kind of only competition for a while, and that he was somebody who could have beat Flex Lewis in the 212 class. I would have been talking about him in the 212s had he not recently competed in Canada and beat a good Nathan Diasha. So you can see some of these pictures here were from Canada of him clearly weighing more than the 212 class. I would guess he's probably around 225 or so. He could possibly be a little heavier. If he's lighter than that, it's because he's so damn shredded. He looks big. If he competes in the open, I think that he could be top 5. I think that for him to be top 3, other people would have to screw up. I think that they'd have to come in out of shape or something like that. He's kind of like another Bonnick. He's incredibly complete. He comes in crazy condition. He may not have the muscle bellies that Bonnick has, but he makes up for that by just being shredded to the bone, crazy dry. So I think that if he does the Open, I think that just based on how he is, I think that he could be top 5. But for him to beat the other guys that I've mentioned, I think that he's going to either have to show that he has the mass to be able to stand with them, which he very well might, but I've never seen him next to them. And if he doesn't have the mass, I think the only way he beats them is by out-conditioning them. That they're going to have to be a little bit off for him to nab anywhere in the top 3. Top 5, though, is very realistic if he does the Open. Now, if he ends up doing 212, I think it'll be interesting because from what we've seen from Lunsford, as well as, with Hottie being bigger here, they're both going to have to lose weight to come down to 212. And when they have to lose weight, that's going to change their physique. So Hottie won't look like that, probably still look great. Same thing with what we've seen from Lunsford on his Instagram. But that's, a whole other video talking about the 212 class. Personally, I think he's doing Open, and I think we're going to see him hit the top 5. And regardless, whatever division he ends up in, I'm excited that he's finally getting to do an Olympia. All right, Dexter Jackson, Mr. Olympia 2008. I think Dexter could still win this show. Some people think I'm crazy for saying that. I think everybody wants to say, well, Dexter's 49 years old. There's no way he could win an Olympia. But if you look here, he beat Luke Sandow in Florida. Now, Luke it's his first Olympia coming up, right? He's not a big threat by any means to win the Olympia. So Dexter beating him, that doesn't mean anything. But my point here is Luke is not a small guy. And you can see Dexter standing next to him. Dexter can definitely hang with guys who are big. And we know he's called the Blade for a reason. He's going to be in great condition. He's been in great shape for Florida. I think he's only going to get better before we see him at the Olympia. Now, I don't think he's going to beat a great Roelly or Brandon. I don't even know. It'd be tough for him to beat a really good Bonnick. That said, he could definitely stand next to them. And assuming Dexter's going to show up in his consistent conditioning, if any of those guys slip, just like I said with Hottie, Dexter will take their spots. I think that there's a chance that Dexter can show up even better than he was in Florida. And when we start looking at everybody in the lineup, that you can make an argument that Dexter should be the 2019 Mr. Olympia, which is crazy because the guy's going to be 50 in November. But that's hats off to Dexter. In my opinion, statistically the greatest bodybuilder who's ever done it. More shows competed in, more wins, got plenty of Arnolds, has an Olympia already. I mean, Dexter's ready to sail off into the sunset. So, personally, I'm rooting for Dexter because what a story that would be for him. He's not my favorite to win, but I think that he's a safe bet to have in your top 5. I think he'll be fighting for the top 3, and there's a chance that he could still win.
So as you guys saw, my predictions for top 3, I think it's going to be between Brandon Currie, Roelly Winklaar, and William Bonek. And I think that it's going to really come down to who shows up. Roelly has not been that consistent. Recently, Brandon has been that consistent. He has some newfound mass that he's put on within the last couple years, especially within the last year. And William Bonek has always been pretty consistent, especially the last 2 or 3 years. He's very complete. He shows up in pretty good conditioning. So any one of those 3 guys, I think, has the potential to beat each other. It's really going to depend who shows up. As of right now, I think Currie is my favorite, followed by Roelly, then Bonek. But I'm excited to see all 3 of them on stage with each other. And not only that, but if any one of them slip, I think that Dexter, and if Khadisha Pond does the Open, I think that both of those guys are going to be there to capitalize on any mistake by that top 3.
All right, so now that I've gone over who I think is going to be in the top 5, I'll mention the guys that I think are going to place 6th through 10th. Now, each one of these guys has a potential to crack the top 5 if the guys in the top 5 don't show up, meaning they don't show up in shape, or when they start doing the call-outs, they're just not as dominant as I'm predicting them to be. So the first guy that I want to mention is Nathan Diasha. Now, all of these guys are kind of on the taller side, but Nathan has great structure and plenty of size, and he shows up in great condition as well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see him stand next to this next guy, Luke Sandow, who it's Luke's first Olympia, because whenever Nathan won one of the shows, I think the Two Bro show earlier this year, Luke presented the trophies and then kind of did a pose down next to Nathan, which, you know, somebody can argue and say that maybe he shouldn't have done that. Maybe he should have stood there and let the guys who were actually competing in that show, you know, flex, because when you're more or less off season wearing a tank top, you're going to look huge. And sure enough, the internet was like, oh, he's going to smoke Nathan. He's bigger than him and all this stuff. Which he very well might. But I think that it's something where they're going to be able to settle it on the stage. And, you know, I don't think Nathan was very happy about it. Both of these guys seem to be pretty outspoken from what I see on the internet anyways. I don't really know either one of them. But I think that it's going to be a little bit of fireworks at the Olympia, because I think you're going to see them stand next to each other at some point. And I think that this picture here is going to be something that people are going to look back on, and then you're going to have a real life, these two guys standing next to each other competing on the Olympia stage, and we'll see who comes out on top. I think that Steve Kukla is going to be in the mix. Steve is a big guy, and when he shows up in sharp condition, he's dangerous. Juan Morel is always in really good condition. You know, one could say that his quads need a little more mass to really hang with the top guys. He's got a crazy vacuum he's been working on, and he's got pretty good aesthetics. So Juan is definitely somebody who, if somebody doesn't show up in shape, I think Juan's going to capitalize on that. Now, Cedric McMillan. Cedric got to the Olympia this year on a special invite because he technically didn't qualify. Supposedly, he was going to qualify on points. He was real close by doing some shows over the summer, but he wasn't able to compete because he's active in the military. So they gave him a special invite because of that. And for one, I want to say I think that that's really cool on the IFBB and the Mr. Olympia's part for giving him the special invite, because I do think that, you know, we should show thanks to those who choose to serve in our military. And I think that it's something that's cool for, especially a guy like Cedric, who's been around for a while, who definitely should be on the Olympia stage every year. And I think that the fact that he's still actively serving in the military and still competing as a professional bodybuilder is really cool. And I think that the little bit of help they gave him so he could do this year's Olympia, I think it's a good thing. I think it's cool. Now, that said, I'm a stickler for rules. I don't like the special invites. I liked when they did it with Kevin Levrone. That was cool because everybody knew that Kevin wasn't going to win the show. It was like an exhibition, you know. Maybe he thought he was going to, but, you know, I wasn't buying it. But it was kind of a paying homage to the past. Now, to invite a guy like Cedric, who can clearly win the Olympia, if he shows up to his potential that we've all kind of been hoping to see, that's a different story. So I kind of have mixed emotions on the deal because I support the reasoning behind why they gave him the special invite, but I don't like special invites. I would have rather seen Cedric earn his way there, just like everybody else, despite his career. I'm grateful for all those who serve in the military, but he chooses to serve in the military. So, you know, anybody else who has any other sort of job that can get in the way of them competing, you know, we should just be careful with how many of these special invites we're handing out, because it's a very slippery slope. That said, it's their show. They can do what they want. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Cedric. I love his physique. I like his personality. I think he's a great dude. If anybody deserves a special invite, he does. And especially because he was actively serving in the military, and they decided to give it to him because he couldn't have competed over the summer to get, you know, a few more points to show up. So that's my thoughts on that. I'm not knocking them. I like that he's going to be in the Olympia. At the same time, please don't give out special invites all the time. Make people have to earn it. I like following the sport enough to see who's getting what points and where, and following that storyline of each one of these guys working their ass off to get to the biggest stage. And the special invites kind of muddy that a bit.
So as I just mentioned, I'm really excited to see Nathan Diasha and Luke Sandow on stage next to each other, getting a comparison. I think that, I don't know either one of those guys. All I have for information is what I see on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. So I'm not trying to stir up any beef. I don't think there's any beef between them. But I think that image that I showed where Luke hits that, most muscular next to Nathan, I think that kind of rubbed Nathan the wrong way. And maybe Luke did that on purpose. Maybe he wanted to get under his skin. Maybe he's coming for his place in the hierarchy of things, So that's exciting to me, because if there is beef, of course it's exciting, because you want to see two guys stand next to each other who don't like each other, like when Kai and Phil had issues back in the day, right? If there is no beef, it's still exciting because these guys are both competitive at the same spot in their career, so to speak. Nathan's been around a little bit longer, but they're guys fighting for the same spots in the Olympia lineup. So they're going to be a very good comparison between the two of those guys.
All right, and now for the guys who are going to be fighting to make the top 10 that will round out the rest of the show. I'm going to go ahead and list them off. John De La Rosa, Lucas Osladil, Patrick T. Moore, Akeem Williams, Max Charles, Mohammed Shaban, Michael Lockett, just dropped my pen for those of you that heard that, Clarence DeVee, and then Josh Lenardowitz, who I believe isn't competing this year for personal reasons. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys my placings, the order in which I think these guys are going to place, and then you can let me know if you agree or disagree, and then we'll see who's right at the end of the Olympia.
So I'm excited for this year's Olympia. I think that we got some storylines in the works. I can't wait to see how they're going to unfold. You guys have now seen my predictions, see who I think is going to win and how I think they're going to place. So let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. And until next time, you're tuned in to BodyGeeks.